When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to episode 6 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, we have quite the celebrity in the studio with us. Co-founder and chief strategy officer of GDP Advisors, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and you can see him many mornings on news shows discussing business, current events, and numerous other topics. Seth Denson, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
With a lead up like that, maybe we should just drop the mic and call it a day. You have set the bar really high, my friend, and now you gotta realize what I have to step up to.
Hey, man,
and I love it when you say quite the celebrity. And everybody's listening to your show, going, "Who is this guy? I've never heard of him." So
exactly. Well, hey, they're going to be tuning in now to their local news station to see the pretty boy Seth, who once was mistakenly compared to me. By my own mother.
By your mother, yes. Which, you know what? As I understand how mothers feel about their sons, I took as quite the compliment.
There you go.
I have to say that.
There you go. So. All right, Seth. So get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, first and foremost, I am a child of the living God. I am a husband to a wonderful wife who way outpunted my coverage to get. You know what that's like.
Yes.
And 3 unbelievably amazing kiddos, and I know I'm biased, but I really, all the credit goes to Jenna, but I am very blessed and fortunate. So that is my life right there in a nutshell. And when I'm not, living my life from that perspective, I get the opportunity to work at a fantastic firm. I had the pleasure of getting to help co-found back in 2012. And, great staff, and we get to help clients all the time, help them manage their businesses to be more effective and efficient and understand their risks and assets and what they're doing. And we have the luxury of getting to pick our clients as much as they get to pick us, which I think is a fantastic place to be.
100% agree.
And in 2019, we became part of a very large private equity group, one of the largest fintech private equity funds in the world, actually, and it's just been a fun ride from a vocational perspective. And then, to your point, I get to go on TV and not break cameras, shockingly, on a daily basis. Was on this morning. I'm on just about every morning on a various network and talk about everything from business to politics to faith and fatherhood, and it's a good time.
Quite the plethora of information.
A little bit of a resume, I guess.
For sure. So back when we first met, you were doing GDP Advisors, and that was really it at that point in time. So let's walk back a little bit further. You're a West Texas boy.
Born and bred.
Where'd you grow up?
Midland,
Texas.
Everything else we say is in the vicinity of West Texas, but Midland is West Texas.
That's the home base for West Texas?
That's right. Not Odessa, for all the listeners out there that are from Odessa. I love you, but love to hate you. And no, I'm kidding. We were somewhere the other day and somebody said, "Oh, you're from Midland, Odessa." I'm like, "No, I'm from Midland." People from Odessa say they're from Midland, Odessa. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. But no. So I mean, listen, there's that football rivalry.
Absolutely.
If you've seen Friday Night Lights, I lived that in real time. And so there's that rivalry. I've got tons of friends in Odessa. We still give each other a hard time, when it comes to football and everything else. So
absolutely, we tried a case several years ago back in Odessa, and there is quite the rivalry, and you can feel it even being a visitor for a few days. There's always something that comes up about those Midland people. And
I remember growing up when Midland Lee would play Odessa Permian, people would literally camp out for high school football tickets. They would camp out, and you're sitting there going, "This is high school football, right?" So
But that's Texas high school football in a nutshell, though. When you think of Texas high school football, most people think of like a Lee Permian game.
That's it.
Period.
Yep.
I grew up in Plano. Plano East used to be that way. Then they started introducing more high schools and kind of lost that. But So grew up in Midland.
Yep.
What'd you do next? Graduated high school from there?
So went to Midland Christian School. So, really what I say that I got the foundation of life there because you said great administrators, great friends, still some of my best friends in the world from there. I am one of those people that drove my vocational career with a massive chip on my shoulder from a perspective of I'm a college dropout. So, it was one of those things where as I entered into high school, so originally my career path was to go into full-time ministry. That was what I thought I was going to do. My father was a pastor of a church, grew up, pastor's kid, thought, and it was kind of thought for me too, not necessarily by my father, but really by just everybody around me that I would follow in Dad's footsteps. And I remember I was going into that time in my senior year, I was playing baseball. I had only looked at colleges that had both baseball programs and biblical theology programs, so that narrowed the list. And I'd had plenty of offers to play ball and to study biblical theology, and college was going to be paid for, and it was great, but it was coming down to that time where it was time to make a decision. And I was really struggling with it. And I had this routine that my dad and I would have before every baseball game is that we would go out into center field, I would stretch, I would kind of do my thing, and my dad would come out and we'd visit and we'd pray and we'd go about, pounding the other team's teeth in, right? That was kind of the natural progression of it.
Right after prayer, then we go into
that's it. That's right. Right after prayer, like little David and Goliath, let's roll, right? So anyway, this particular time though, my dad could sense like there's a heaviness, and he said, "Hey, I know it's getting to be that time. You got to make a decision. Where's your head at?" And I was like, "Dad, I just don't know." And I lost it, man. I broke down. I mean, all of that emotion and weight of an 18-year-old kid having to make a life decision at 18, right? And I was like, I just don't know what I want to do. And he goes, well, let me ask you this. He goes, why do you feel called to go into vocational ministry? I thought about it for a second, and I just had to be honest with him. I said, Dad, I don't know that I am called to do it. And he said, well, then don't. That would be the worst decision you could ever make. He goes, ministry can be part of everyday life. It doesn't have to be your job. Right. But if it is your job, you need to make sure you're called to do that job, because there is a whole new plethora of issues you're going to have to face in life that if you're not called to do it, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So if you ever felt pressure from me as your father or anybody else, I relieve you of that. You have no pressure from me to do that. Matter of fact, quite frankly, if you're not called to do it, I don't want you to do it. So take that for what it is. Well, it was an immediate relief to hear that, because it was just like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulder in that moment. But then came the other problem, which was most of my scholarships were predicated upon me both playing baseball and studying biblical theology. And I took that moment also to tell my father, oh, by the way, I don't want to play baseball anymore. I'm over this. I don't want to do this anymore.
Completely life-threatening.
Yeah, hey, listen, let's just go for that 1-2 punch. So he said, all right, that's fine. So the good news is in Midland, if you graduated from a Midland high school, and Midland has what's called the Abel Hanger Foundation Scholarship Fund. Now, I don't know if they still do, but they certainly did 20 plus years ago when I was getting out of high school. And effectively, if you maintained a certain level of GPA and you were willing to do a certain number of community service, something like 1,000 hours of community service or something like that a semester, your college is paid for at Midland College. So it's like, well, all right. Well, I mean, that sounds like a fantastic idea. I mean, I'm forfeiting these scholarships. Well, let's go. And my dad had always sat us down. There was 3 boys in my family. He sat each of us down when we were going into high school and said, hey, your job over the next 4 years is to figure out how to get that next 4 years paid for, because your mom and I we don't have the means to do it. And even if we did, we wouldn't, because you'll try a lot harder if it's your responsibility. So, I'm thrilled to say that all 3 of us boys ended up with full rides to go to college at different places, doing different things. And Dad would say, I don't care if it's with a book, your brain, or the baseball glove. I don't care, but figure it out. So I had to kind of do that because I didn't want to come out with debt. So went to Midland College, did that for a year, got offered an internship, first with Merrill Lynch, and then a gentleman who knew me in the community reached out to me when he heard I'd gotten offered the Merrill Lynch opportunity. And he said, hey, don't do that. You're not wired for Merrill Lynch. That's a whole different ball game. And I know you and I know your family. I think you'd be more wired. He did the same thing, asset management, financial firm. Said, come to work with me, which I did. I turned down the Merrill Lynch opportunity and went to go to work for him, and immediately realized that was a career that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so the path to that was interesting because, when I went to college, again, I'm at community college, but I redeclared my major 5 times. And my guidance counselor pulled me in on like the 5th time. She said, Seth, you don't have to declare anything. You're a freshman taking English 1301. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
I said, I get that, Miss Reed, but I've never been anybody that did not have a goal in mind. Like, I needed to have a goal. What's the destination that we're headed towards? Because I didn't want to be wandering aimlessly, So she said, that's fine. What do you like to do? I said, I have no idea. She said, what do you want to do? I said, I have no idea. She goes, what do you like to do? I said, I like to play golf. She said, are you good at it? I said, no, I'm not, actually. She said, well, all right, here's what you do. Go down and ask a bunch of the guys that you know, or go to the golf course like on Wednesday afternoon when you don't have class and ask people what they're doing that allows them to play golf on a Wednesday afternoon. Whatever that is.
Fantastic piece of advice.
That's what you do. That's great advice, right? So they were all in the financial sector. Whether that be insurance, risk management, financial asset management, they were all in that financial sector. So that was it. At the time, I knew somebody at Merrill Lynch. That's when I applied for that job. Ended up getting this gig over at Sun America, and it was great. It kind of gave me that intro, and I was like, I really like this. I really like what I'm doing here, and for 10 years of my life, I pursued that as a career. I realized early on you didn't have to have a degree to do this. You had to have education and a desire to learn. And what I decided to do was take jobs working for people that maybe I would take jobs making much less than probably the job afforded in order to gain the knowledge. So I looked at what the college landscape was at that time. And it's even gone astronomically higher since then, and realized I'm going to have a real problem paying for college while doing this. And so I made the decision. It was a gamble, and it's paid off, certainly, to rather than invest a couple $100,000 in college tuition, I would invest a couple $100,000 worth of sweat equity in working for people for less than maybe they would be willing to pay in order to gain the institutional knowledge I would need to be good at what I do. So effectively, I was able to gain an MBA level education without having the piece of paper on the wall. And certainly that did 2 things. One, I had to recognize that I was going to have to try harder than everybody else. I was going to have to work harder than everybody else because I was going to have to prove that while I didn't have that MBA, I could do the work and I could understand it. The other thing I think it did for me, and again, I'm not saying that I don't believe that everybody shouldn't go to college. Well, I am saying that. I don't think everybody should go to college, but I am still an advocate of people going to college. I want my kids to go to college.
Sure.
But for me, there was an avenue that made sense for me not to. But while formalized college education isn't for everybody, education is. And you have to gain that education. And for me, it was gaining that education by surrounding myself with who I felt were people in the business that had a high level of integrity, that understood the business, that had an interesting and unique way of looking at it from an outside-the-box perspective. And that coupled with my recognition that I was going to have to work harder, I was going to have to work everybody to show that my sweat equity was worth the piece of paper. It worked out, I think, to my advantage. Fast forward now 20 years into the business, and it's panned out all right.
Well, and so you're in the area where you're dealing with college graduates the vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
I deal with, obviously, lawyers and lots of our kind of newer employees are college grads, but I don't really look at that. When I look at resumes, I'm not really looking at schools that they went to. Mm-hmm. And for paralegal positions, I'm not really even looking to see if they have a paralegal certificate. Yeah. I'm looking for a skill set, and I'm looking for enthusiasm and passion. And quite frankly, I'm not the only one who's looking at things that way.
Yeah.
And I think as we move forward and college continues to get more and more and more expensive, going out and, you're putting in that sweat equity. You're not making as much as you otherwise could, but you're gaining that quote-unquote college education, and you're coming out having made some money and certainly not owing any money.
That's it.
And so I think that is a hugely important thing for people to consider. We both have kids, and as our kids get older, the dogma from my parents was it's not if you're going to college, it's where you're going to college, right? Yep. And so I think that's almost transitioning a little bit, and I think for our generation, as we raise our kids, I think there's going to be more people looking into, okay, well, what if we did it more like Seth Denson? Mm-hmm. Or what if we did it to where we pursued a different type of degree where it's not, at a formal education facility, a university per se, and we went about it a different direction.
Yeah, I think. Listen, I don't think there's any question the landscape's changing on that, right? And institutional universities have shot themselves in the foot by doing what they've done with tuition and structuring what they're doing, because they are making it so unaffordable, or at least without the debt. And then you come out and that for the next 10 to 20 years, I'm going to be working on paying this down. So that being said, I love what people like Mike Rowe have done for bringing knowledge to the fact that, you know what, you can have a fantastic life and feel relevant in your life without having that piece of paper on the wall. Now, don't get me wrong. If I go in for brain surgery, I'm going to kind of want to make sure that person went to med school.
Sure.
If I'm going into a legal case, I want to make sure that the lawyer went to law school, right? All of these things apply, but there is a foundational subset of knowledge that you can gain out there without going to formal education in an institution, and that was the path for me. And listen, I will tell you, I have to get up, and this happened I guess it was about 2016. I was at that point of, I'll call it burnout in my vocational life. I mean, the firm was doing okay. It wasn't expanding the way that maybe we'd hoped that it would, but we were doing well. We were having success. My business partner, John, and I, we liked each other, which is an important thing if you've got a business partner.
Yes.
We respect each other. We had a lot of mutual respect for what the other brought to the table. And we complimented each other. The things that I did well, he maybe lacked in, and vice versa. So, but it still didn't mean that there wasn't burnout. And what I realized I was missing in life, I knew what I did. I knew my field. I knew, and that switch had gone off where I recognized, not from an arrogance level, from a confidence perspective, I'm as good at this as anybody in this business. Mm-hmm. And there is a powerful thing when that switch happens. And there's up until a certain point in my career, I kind of had that, what do they call it? Not intruder syndrome. Imposter, thank you. Imposter syndrome, where I was like, well, man, how did I get here? Right? Man, if things broke one way versus this way, I'd be in a very different scenario. But listen, that's everybody in life. But I would tell myself those lies that, hey, you don't really deserve to be in the position you're in. But then one day that flipped, and I remember sitting in a prospective client's office one day when it did. And I was sitting in this client's office. I mean, they had every degree under the sun. And I'm going, I am a lot smarter than them at what I do, and I need to have confidence in that. And listen, confidence lives right next door to arrogance. So you got to be sure which house you're going into. But people that are arrogant lack confidence. And they try to exude it when they don't have it. So for me, Bo, by 2016, while I had institutional confidence in what I did as a job, I did not have the business acumen I needed to be a business leader in what I did as a job. And I was relying too heavily on my business partner and really, quite frankly, on the environment. Mm-hmm. We were making bad hires, to your point. We were looking at all the wrong things. We weren't assessing talent appropriately, which meant that the burden was falling back on us. We were working on the business or in the business as opposed to on the business too much. And so I made the decision that I had to go back to school, not institutional school, but educational school from a perspective. And so I made a specific decision on the key areas of my life that I needed to focus on and develop, which was primarily focused on business acumen. And so I did. I reached back out to all these people that I'd worked with in the past, advisors and coaches and people that I respected, and said, where should I go to gain better business acumen knowledge? And I made it a goal that for 1 year I would read a book a month on business acumen. And what I would do is at the beginning of the month, I would start out with 2 books, recognizing that I may get into a book and hate it. Right. And if I hated it, I don't want to have to finish it. So I would give myself the out that if I started 2, I had to finish 1. And what I ended up almost always finishing both, and sometimes picking up another one. So by the time 12 months had rolled by, I'd read somewhere in the range of 30 books on business acumen from business leaders. And so I really felt like I was able to gain that knowledge and grow it. And that really helped propel our firm to the next level. And that's what led to ultimately getting a TED Talk, which led to a book deal, which led to me getting called by virtually every major news outlet to be a go-to expert in everything. It started in the healthcare space because that was an area of focus of mine. And then it expanded. And even today now, I don't talk about healthcare much. I actually talk more about the business climate, what's going on economically. And, sometimes I have to sit back and go, where in the world? Like I was on recently with Stephen Moore, Donald Trump's advisor, senior economic advisor. And, he got asked a question. He goes, that's probably a better question for Seth. He's more of an expert on this than I am. And I went, how did this, Stephen, I love you, man. I don't know that, but it was a really powerful thing, not from an egotistical perspective, although it helped, but from a recognition of that investment in time is paying off. And it's a lot of fun.
Well, so let's focus on that for a minute. So you and I have exchanged tons of book ideas.
Yep.
I've picked your brain on solid books to read as I'm trying to do the exact same thing, improve business acumen. And so at what point did you start to see, hey, these same principles keep coming up, right? They're packaged a little bit differently, but really they're all kind of saying the same types of things. So this book right here is the one that grabbed me. This is the one that makes the most sense to me, but all these principles are really just the same principles repackaged in different ways. How many books did you have to get through before you started realizing that?
I was probably 3 or 4 in. I mean, it was very quick. Now, interestingly enough, and again, I think that the beauty of reading multiple books, even if they're multiple books on similar topics, is you recognize that the writer is really trying to identify his audience or her audience through their stylistic of writing. And I did the same thing when I wrote my book, right? Sure. It was recognizing I need to do this a certain way. Now, somebody asked me what I do for a living. I'm like, and I tell people, I'm a professional storyteller. And I try to focus on nonfiction, especially in the business world, right? But the reality is I think people respond to stories. They really need to understand it in more of a parable-like form. And maybe that goes back to, my pastoral background of a father, right? So, Christ actually taught in parable form. So,
it's good enough for him. It's good enough for you.
It works, right? So I gravitate when I'm reading business books to people like Patrick Lencioni or Bob Burke, right? Or these writers that really write in these parabolistic type forms. Sure. So that you can understand that there's good quality lessons to be learned here, but they're done in a way that help you kind of identify with the story. But what was interesting when I got away from them, not away from them from a perspective of like, hey, I was trying other books out.
Yeah.
I'm going, they're kind of saying the same thing. These are just more almost like lecturer in a college classroom, and these are more of, let me tell you a story. And I go back to when I was in college, my favorite professors were those that told stories. Like I had this history professor at Cisco College. I had transferred to Abilene to start a financial firm. Hung my shingle at 21. Boy, you want to talk about challenges in life. People were like, what? Why would I take any financial advice from you? I'm like, I have no idea how to answer that
because
question.
I got a shingle out here.
I know, right?
Clearly, I know what I'm doing.
I know what the internet is, and it's 2001, and nobody else does. But anyway, I had this history professor. I was taking night classes, and it was a 3-hour class on history. So for those of you that are not history buffs or fans, taking 3-hour, one night a week from 7 to 10 p.m., right? And we would have this history professor, and he would come in, he would set his bag down, he would sit on the edge of the desk and be like, and this is the way he started every class. I want to tell you a story. And he would go into a lesson. And you were just mesmerized by his ability to formulate the information in a way that was such a story that you were going, I've never heard it this way. You were holding on to every word that he was saying. And so I looked at that from a business perspective and said, if I want to go out and talk to prospective clients, I need to be able to tell them a story of what ultimately we're trying to gain from an outcomes perspective, and then what the journey is like to get there. And if we can do that, we can help align our interests in a way that will help us achieve the goals. And so even today, now fast forward 20 years later, it's how I try to approach my career is recognize I still need to tell that story. I need to give them, we jokingly in the office call it the Yellow Brick Road methodology.
Yeah.
I need to get a client to Oz. Well, to do that, I have to paint the Yellow Brick Road so that they understand how to get there. And I think that whatever career you're in or whatever you're doing in life, even in personal life, right? Conversations with your spouse. What is odds? And there was a book that I read, and I'm going to blank on the name, but let me think about it. It was like Crucial Conversations, I think, is what it was.
Okay.
And effectively, it started out with this: what are you trying to accomplish through this conversation? Because so many people that enter into conversations kind of run the conversation as it goes. And that's when people start to get defensive, and as opposed to starting each conversation going, what do I want the outcome of this to be?
What's your through line?
That's it.
Yeah.
And once I know that, now let's paint a path to get there. Because if I can keep that as my focus and my goal, I can get there. And so now today when I'm advising clients on risk or assets or whatever it is we're doing, it's the same thing. Where are we trying to go?
Yeah, with every potential new client we meet with at the law firm, it is, here's the process.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help you to get healthy, to get all your bills paid, and to put something in your pocket for having to have gone through everything that you've been put through.
Yep.
Right? That is the end goal. Right? Here's how we get there. Here's the different phases that we're going to have to go through. Here's the pitfalls that we're going to teach you how to avoid. Here is what you got to do in order to get to that finish line. Mm-hmm. I've always told everybody that if you're not a history fan or if you hated history class, you did not have the right teacher.
That's it.
Because that should be the most entertaining and interesting class ever.
Yeah.
We have a jewel here in Collin College, Joe Janes, an amazing history teacher, and I would imagine most people would feel about him as you do about your history teacher.
Yeah.
Now, the word goal has come up several times. You say, hey, I've got to have a goal. I got to see the finish line. I got to have something that I'm moving towards. How do you set those goals? Walk us through your process, as well as how do you make sure that you are staying on that goal? How often are you looking back and measuring? What's your method?
Well, I first start with the time horizon, right?
Okay.
So I think every goal, if you do not start and set a goal based on a time horizon, you're setting yourself up for failure,
Sure.
right? So really, what is that time horizon? What are my goals today? What are my goals over the next quarter, year, 5 years, beyond?
Gotcha.
And I try not to set too many goals beyond that 5-year mark. I'm a father. I love Walker Hayes' new song. I got to keep my daughter off the pole, my son out of jail. Got to go to church so I don't go to hell. Convince my wife, to help her to understand that I married up and she married down, right?
Right.
Those are the long-term goals, right?
Sure,
So we
sure.
know those. Like,
let's avoid the disasters.
It's interesting because you know this because you've got daughters and son. Same with me. I've got daughters and son, and it is. There's always that Jen and I joke. I'll do something, a bad father moment. I'm going, this is the moment. This is the moment that they either end up on the pole or on Dr. Phil's couch.
Right.
I'm joking. I hope. But nonetheless, it is those things. As a dad, right? I do recognize that the things that I do today will have an eternal impact on them going forward. So those are both short and long-term objectives and goals. Vocationally, it is one of those things that I am trying. I do set daily objectives. When I don't, I find that my day is much less accomplished, and I document everything. I tell my staff this, and I live by this. If you don't document it, it doesn't happen or didn't happen. And so for me, when I get up, so I'm an early riser. I get up 4:30 every morning. I should say every morning, most mornings.
Jocko style.
Yeah, and I started doing that in 2016 when I kind of did that whole reset thing. I realized that while I may not have everything in life that everybody else does, the one consistent thing, the great equalizer of all, is time. And I have exactly the same amount as anybody that graduated from Harvard or didn't even get a GED. Right? Sure. We all have the exact same amount of time in a day. And what we do to maximize the value of that is up to each of us. So for me, it was recognizing that I've always been a morning person anyway, but those wee hours of the morning are the time when your mind is the sharpest, it's the clearest, it's without the gunk that comes. I need to maximize the value out of it. And so it's interesting, even today, the amount of accomplishments I have between 4:30 and we'll call it 8 a.m. Outweigh by the multitude those that I do between 8 and 5. it's insanity when you think about it, in that we'll call it 3.5 hours, what I am able to achieve versus the 8 hours of the rest of the day. And so for me, I maximize that. That's done a couple of things. If I do that, it affords me the ability towards the end of the day to be at home with my kids, to shut off the brain and allow myself to be present.
Right.
Jen and I made this comment, when in 2016, when I was really struggling, I remember telling an advisor of mine, coach, that I said, I feel like when I'm at work, I'm a bad father. When I'm at home, I'm a bad business partner, and I can't figure out a good work-life balance. And he said, there's your problem. You're thinking of balance like the balance of a scale. He goes, it's not. Balance is the balance of a checkbook or a bank account, for all you kids out there that don't know what a checkbook is, right? And you have to balance it from a perspective of recognizing that sometimes your balance is up and sometimes it's down. Sometimes you're going to need to invest over here, and sometimes you're going to need to invest over there. And you need to recognize that you need to have your stakeholders on board with you in those investments, meaning that when you need to go to Jenna and say, honey, it is time, I've got to invest some time over here at work, I got to go invest that time, she's on board with that, because she will also then recognize that there will come a time when you're going to invest at home.
Right.
And that way you don't have to focus on that. So for me, it started there, and I still try to live by that principle every day. Doesn't mean I accomplish it every day. So when I set my goals, it starts with today, because that's what I can control right now. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. Today is as close to guaranteed as I can get, so I'm going to try to accomplish what I can today. All of that will work, and I divide out what is this operating towards the long-term goals. So I have daily goals and then annual goals. I know a lot of people set monthly goals and quarterly goals. I don't. It's an annual goal, and I call them my big rocks. So what are the big rocks that I need to move forward this year? And that way you focus on the big rocks. For those of you who haven't read Traction, I know you have. I read that book, and it was like, oh, this is amazing, right? So for me, it was reading that and going, I can apply this in my life. So what are my big rocks? Those are annual things. And then big rocks on a daily basis that help me move to that.
So let me pause you right there.
Yeah.
So you don't have a quarterly plan, or quarterly goals, 6-month goals, monthly goals. So then how do you say, okay, here's this big goal at the end of the year. How do you backtrack that to today, right?
Well, it goes. So I do an annual plan. So whether with our executive team, we sit down and we do an annual plan. We check in quarterly on our objectives, and certainly there are times when those rocks will change based on just the overall landscape. But when we sit down at the beginning of the year, we tend to sit down at we sit down every year and we say, all right, what are our goals for this year? What are the big rocks that we want to move forward over the next 12 months? When we look back at this meeting 12 months from now and we go, boy, we were successful. What does that look like? Obviously, there's the tangible, where were our margins? Did we hit our EBITDA targets? Those types of things. But really, what is going to help us feel relevant? What is going to help us feel fulfilled that we accomplished something? We set those out. And then we delegate who's responsible for those rocks.
Sure.
And then we add into them our personal rocks. What are those personal things that we're wanting to accomplish? Whether that's, for me, it's, okay, I want to make sure I write another book, or I want to speak a certain number of times. I want to be able to do X amount of media appearances, right? Then it's all a numbers game. So if I know that there are 365 days in a year, this is the end goal, back into that, all of those things, and I know every day this is what I have to do to accomplish it. And if I do more in this day, then maybe that makes up for a day that I did a little bit less. And so for me, it helped me gain a clear perspective of that time horizon. And there are always sub-goals, and those sub-goals will be those quarterly things. I know, hey, I need to achieve this over the next month or quarter in order to get to that. But the recognition of I can't control the quarter, I can control today. Everything from that annualized perspective comes back down into today. And that's the way that I've just always done it.
And so one of the things that I see, we have all of our employees sit down, we do a one-on-one meeting with them, say, okay, what is it that you want to accomplish at the end of this year? And then we go back and we set up a plan, say, okay, say you want to learn more about the litigation practice. All right, perfect. What does that mean? And so what I've found is people are terrible at setting goals. One, they don't put a time limit on it, to your point. And two, it's just not clear enough,
right? Exactly
what you're after. So what is it when you look at somebody who says, Seth, here's my goal, to determine whether that's a good goal, bad goal, or isn't really even a goal?
How do you accomplish it? Because if you don't know the how and you have to learn that on the fly, you won't accomplish it. Very rarely. We call that luck when you do. But listen, I was telling somebody the other day, I call it, what is your strategy? What is your strategy for accomplishing that? And I'll tell my employees that. I'll tell my clients that too when they say, hey, we want to do this. Okay, well, what's your strategy for doing it? And they'll kind of turn to me and say, well, like, for example, if I'm managing a healthcare portfolio, and we've got a client that's spending X and they want to spend Y, right? Obviously, they want to spend less. I'm like, great, what's the strategy to do it? Do you have Guidos? Are they going to kill your people off? Like, what are we doing here? Right. And like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, listen, I'm a hopeful guy, and I'm all for hope. But hope and strategy, I'll take strategy over hope.
Sure.
Right? Because that is a tangible thing that we can work towards. So I tell people that, and I do it for myself. What is the strategy to get there? And if you don't have clarity on the strategy, then you probably don't have clarity on the goal.
Right.
Right? So let's get the goal down to its simplest form. Right? So, okay, I want to make $1 million this year. Okay, what's your strategy for doing it? Well, I need to sell more clients. Okay, what are you going to sell them? Well, I'm going to sell them everything I sold them for. Okay, well, if that's the case, then why didn't you write $1 million last year of new business? Right? Well, I don't know. So what is going to be your strategy for doing something different than you did before when you didn't write that $1 million? Is it a time game? Is it a numbers game? Is it a messaging game? Is it a new strategy that you've developed that you think that can be identified in the client? Are you identifying the prospect for your solution, not the solution for your prospect? And I say that to anybody that's in sales.
Right.
And we're notoriously bad at this. And I was too for years, is I would go into a prospective client and say, well, okay, well, here's all the things that we could do. We need to go find this. No. Here's what I do. Here's what I do really well. And if you're a fit for that, then we can work together. And if you're not, we shouldn't, because I'm not all that smart, but I'm really good at what I do. But I stay in my lane. And so for anybody that's in sales or trying to grow a business, and by the way, that's everybody. If you don't think you're in sales, you're paralegals, guess what? They're in sales.
Absolutely.
Everybody is. You need to find a prospect for your solution, not a solution for your prospect. And then you need to have a process by which you accomplish your day or your client meeting or whatever it is. So for us and for me, it was developing, I call it a 4-meeting process for my new prospective clients. We have 4 meetings. 4 meetings are all we're going to have. And then after that 4th meeting, you're going to pay me. And here's how that works. And here's what we're going to accomplish in meeting 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you have to have clearly identifiable objectives on a daily basis. That all help you down that yellow brick road to Oz. And so for somebody who doesn't have clarity on that, or we can't get clarity on that, we need to get really clear on where Oz is. Where is it on the map? And then what is the right-hand turn, left-hand turn, all the different things that we're going to have to do in order to get there on a daily basis. And so when I tell people, and they say, here's my annual goal, I say, okay, well, great. What is our path to get there today on a daily basis? Not, hey, what do we have to do this quarter? What do we have to do this month? What do we have to do this? What is today? Because again, today is what I can control. What are the steps you're going to take towards Oz today down the yellow brick road? And if you have a clear understanding of how and what to do for there, you will likely get to Oz.
So long as they know that it's Oz they're going to, right? One of the things that I hear all the time is, I want to learn more about litigation. I want to learn Spanish. I want to learn negotiations. Those are all fantastic things, but what does that mean? What does it mean to learn negotiations, right? You got to be more specific than that. What does it mean to learn more about the litigation process? You got to be more specific. Yep. So, I want to learn how to negotiate a small claim to get the maximize the value on it, and do X, Y, and Z. Have specific, so I can say, all right, I'm looking at this. I accomplished this goal. Check it off. I have met my stated goal. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, there is no finish line, right? I want to learn Spanish. Okay, well, do you want to learn like basic Spanish, like how to ask for the check and go to the bathroom, or do you want to be conversational in Spanish? Do you want to learn how to write Spanish? Do you want to be mistaken for a native? I mean, those types of things. And I think we got to have clarification on any goals to be able to say, yes, I've met it.
Yep.
And to your point, that helps us set. Okay, there's the finish line, right?
Yeah. Listen, clarity has to be, you have to be clear on what your objective is. And then you have to also be clear on what your why is. I know there's a lot talked about what's your why, and there's great books and Simon Sinek and all these other people that are out there. And it's fantastic. I've been talking about this for years too, is right. What gives you relevance in life? Like, what is your why? And I tell this to prospective clients all the time, or prospective employees or new employees all the time is, listen, I need you to understand something. When you come to work for me, you're not renting my brand. I'm renting yours. I'm renting your brand. GDP is you. You're not GDP. So when you go to the market, you're not GDP. GDP is you. I'm renting your brand. So where am I going with that is, why are you here and what do you want to accomplish by being here? If it's a paycheck, okay, great. But let's go deeper than that, right? Because time is always traded for money in the workspace. But what you do with that money is really what we're trying to get to. Do you want to make sure you provide a better life for your family? Do you want a bigger house? Do you want a nicer car? Do you want to pay down debt? What are those things that you're trying to ultimately accomplish? Why are you needing money? Why are you trading your time for it here? Why do you feel this is a place that's going to help you feel relevant? You need to answer those questions. And for me, and I tell every employee this, and I still do orientations for our staff, is I said, as long as GDP is the vessel that will allow you to achieve your vocational why, that will help you ultimately gain your personal why, then we're in a very good place. The second that it's not, I need you to come tell me why that is. And if it's not something we can change internally, I will be your biggest cheerleader to help you find a new home where that why can happen. Because if you're not relevant here, then I don't want you here because you won't want to be here. And I say that I believe that there are 4 categories of people in every company. There are rock stars, there are terrorists, there are loiterers, and there are puppies. And the problem is most companies don't focus enough attention on the rock stars. They focus too much attention on trying to save the terrorists. And what happens is the loiterers are never going anywhere, but they're going to come and go, right? They're just hanging out. They're a job. They're a 9-to-5er. They don't really care. And every company's got those, and that's fine. But if you don't eliminate and isolate your terrorists and get them off the ship, your rock stars will leave because they can. Right. And then guess who's left to train your puppies? Right? So as an organization, and I give the full power of my staff, is if you've identified a terrorist, we need to figure out what we got to do with that. Because culture is something that you can't buy. Culture is something that has to be created, but it can't be only owned and managed by the owner. Right. It has to be adopted and lived out by everyone on the staff. That you can't. And those that can't are either loiterers or terrorists or puppies that haven't learned. And so I need my rock stars to carry forward my culture and our culture. And as long as we can do that, we're fine. But that all goes back into that goal setting, feeling relevant. What can I accomplish here in my life? And that's how we kind of set forth our every day.
Fantastic. Tell me about this. You and I have talked about the insurance industry and how things just get completely backwards, upside down, way too often. And a big part of, I don't know how much of it still today is a big part of your practice, but I know for a long time, a lot of your day was spent solving problems.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody comes into the office or you get a client phone call, oh my gosh, this just happened, dumps it in your lap. How do you go through the problem-solving process?
Well, first and foremost is what I tell people is you don't try to find the cause of the problem until you solve the problem itself. Well, there's plenty of time to go back and find the cause, unless the cause is continuously the issue, right? So unless the cause is necessary to identify before you can solve the problem. So, specific to a client-related issue. And I'm fortunate in that, I still... For a lot of years, I felt like maybe I was a fireman because my job was to put out fires. Right. But the great thing is I've got a great leadership team, great staff that they put out those fires a lot of times now, which is really a powerful thing. But the key is let's try to break down the problem into its simplest form that can be solved, and sometimes recognize that some problems can't be. Right? Sometimes it just is what it is, and when it is, you just need to be honest with whomever the problem is with. And yourself. Don't try to solve the unsolvable, at least not in this setting. That's what we do at 4 a.m. when we get up and say, how do we solve the problems that are unsolvable today? And I love what the manufacturer of Dyson said. We identify and solve the obvious problems that our competitors ignore, right? So from a perspective of business, that's what we need to do. But really it is, take that problem and get it down to its most original form, and what does the solution look like, and what is the straightest, easiest path to get there. Don't try to go around it. Don't try to figure out who caused it. Don't identify who's to blame for it. Solve the problem now. as quickly as possible. Then let's go back and say, was this a process breakdown? Was it a personal breakdown? Was it our breakdown? Was it just something that happened? And by the way, sometimes those do, right? And what can we do to keep them from happening again? But I think that whatever the problem is, you got to get it to its simplest form, solve for it, and then back into the, okay, what caused it and why did it happen afterwards?
Talk to me a little bit about failure. I'm sure you've experienced plenty,
No.
plenty. Even though you are a big star now, plenty of failure
on a daily
along the way.
basis, man.
Tell me how do you deal with failure, especially the really big ones, right? Life altering failures.
Yeah.
How do you work through those?
Well, first of all, I don't like them.
So you are human.
Yeah, in more ways than one. I think that people that tell you, "Oh, I thrive in failure situations and I can really overcome them quickly," BS. I call BS. Right? They're masking something. Nobody likes it. If you like failure, then you're a failure, and you just learn to embrace it, right? So listen, I kind of go back to how we solve the problems, which is what was the clearest path to make sure that this failure doesn't reoccur? Was this a lack of my knowledge of the situation, my capability within the situation, or was I outside of my lane, outside of what I do best? And it's the same lesson I tell my kids. Listen, there is nobody that can be good at everything, but everybody can be great at something. And recognize that it's okay when there's something you're not good at, because that's just not the way you were made. Now, does that mean that we don't try to be good at more things? No, you should try to be good, because that's going to help you be great at those things that you can be great at.
Right.
So for me, for failure, it's really assessing what was the root cause of it. Well, first let's go back to, why did it happen? Is it a failure that can be overcome? Let's start there, because, I could fail at something and go, yeah, but I'm not done yet. I can still fight for it. Recognizing when you can't, when the failure just needs to be digested and you need to punt on the opportunity that you think is going to continuously be there to success. Like, I can still get it done. No, that time's passed. It's time to move on. And then reassess, recognize what that is. Again, it's something that I still have to work on, because I still hate it. And I think the second that I don't hate it is the second I need to hang it up.
Right.
Because there's something wrong with me. I hate losing more than I love winning.
I think most people are that way.
For me, when I lose, to me, that is a failure. So let's understand why. And what I ultimately find out is the failure almost is always within me, of either recognizing I got myself into a situation that was unwinnable. Well, that's not anybody's fault but my own.
Right.
Or I got myself into a situation that I wasn't appropriately prepared for, or I didn't have clarity as to how the outcome would be. Listen, I failed in business. I have failed in relationships. I think those are the two primary areas we fail. I've failed in my own personal objective of life, of accomplishing things, whether that's a diet or learning to play the guitar, right? These are these things that I've said, I want to do that, and then I fail at it. At the end of the day, it all comes back to me. And I had a great mentor early on in my life when I was kind of setting out in my journey of business. He said, I want to give you the best piece of advice you're ever going to get. I'm like, what's that? He goes, learn to eat crow fast. He said, you're going to eat it either way. And crow sucks, and it doesn't taste good. But it goes down faster hot than it does cold. So learn to get it down, and get it down fast. In other words, own it. Own your failures. Recognize that there is no one to pass this buck to but you. And you need to own that, recognize what could you have done differently. And if you couldn't have done anything differently, then recognize what you should have identified that shouldn't have gotten you in that position in the first place.
Amen, brother. That's one of our core principles at our law firm is ownership.
Yeah.
We take ownership, right? Everybody on everything, we all take ownership, figure out, hey, what could I have done to either not allow this to happen, to make sure it got done better, or to otherwise fix it.
Yeah.
And one of the points that I really want to stress is, especially in today's day and age where, failure, it's a learning experience. I call failure tuition a lot of times, right? Some tuition is a lot more expensive than others.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, right? It is okay to feel devastated. It's okay to anguish over a failure. But then you got to get up, get back on the horse, and keep going.
Yeah.
And I think so many people feel guilty for feeling awful about failing. And hey, that's how we're made, right? Yeah. If you don't feel guilty about failing, if you don't feel terrible about failing, then you're probably not doing the right thing.
That's it.
So,
but don't let it linger either.
Yeah, you can't let it linger.
You got to move on.
You can't let it destroy you.
That's it.
And that's what I'm saying. You know, feel it, process it, move on.
That's it.
And you got to learn from it.
Yeah.
You got to learn from it. All right, we are almost out of time. A couple of quick questions for you.
All right.
Favorite business book?
Ooh.
You've read a lot. And I'll even give you a couple if you want.
All right, so I'm going to give you a couple. Yeah. The Go-Giver series by Bob Burke. Fantastic series. Great nuggets there. The other one, go back to one of the very first business books I read was Who Moved My Cheese? And I know it's a joke because it's like a 5-minute read. Still a great book. But listen, again, Lencioni's 5 Sessions of an Extraordinary Executive, to me, really set the tone for how I need to be a business leader. And I know now I've given you 3, and I'm going to give you 4. Traction. Traction was one of those, again, it doesn't mean you have to adopt all of it. I certainly didn't, but I was able to walk away with very clear and concise steps of these are the things that I need to do to be successful. So yeah, I would put those 4 books up there. I guess there was 5 there.
All fantastic, and I will echo all of them, but especially Traction. That has been a game changer for me, and we're working on getting even further into it. Yeah. So, all right, non-business book. What's your favorite?
Non-business book.
Could be fiction or nonfiction.
I mean, I guess we got to go with the Bible, right? Is that the token answer?
Well, that's assumed, right?
Okay, we won't. All right, good.
Other than the Bible, favorite non-business book. Well, there are business principles in the Bible too.
There are, and there are some good ones. So it's interesting because I don't read a lot of non-business books anymore, but I have gone back and I'm reading again Atlas Shrugged. And I think that can be kind of a business book, right? Ayn Rand.
A very thick business book.
A very thick business book. But I would probably go with Atlas Shrugged is probably my favorite. We'll call it fictional.
Fair. All right. Book. Favorite podcast other than The Driven Crowd.
Other than The Driven Crowd. And the Bizpo Show, which, hopefully will come back soon. In fairness, I'm not a huge podcast guy.
Sure.
I do a lot of books on tape because, again, I'm always trying to absorb that knowledge. But I am starting to get into podcasts. This one's a great one. My buddy Heath Oakes has one called Second Shot. And him and his wife, Jenny. Jenny's a local newscaster here in Dallas. And then Heath is a business executive here. And so if I'm out for a run and I go, I got like 27 minutes here to kill on a podcast, because they're really good about keeping it in that time frame, I tend to listen to one of theirs.
Okay. And what's something you and Jen are watching right now?
Oh, I don't know that I want that out there in the world to be admitted to. We haven't picked up the last season of Ozark yet. That's next on the list.
Sarah and I are awaiting that one as well. We just finished Yellowstone.
Yeah. Yellowstone is when it's we have. I don't know. I can't tell you how many subscription services I have now for all these various shows. We are diehard Dateline fans, which is a little scary because they're like half of them are about being murdered, and it's
and the spouse always did it.
It causes. I'm like, what's wrong with us that we love the show so much? But we do. And I have told her if I die before he does, whatever money I have in the account, I'm putting in the will that Keith Morrison must be the narrator of my obituary. You must get him to read it because his voice is one of those that
absolutely.
It's just but yeah, so Dateline, Yellowstone is one of those. I personally am watching Billions right now, which for me in the business world, it's a little cutthroat, so I'm enjoying it. But yeah, those are probably the ones that we're about to start the last season of Ozark. So I'm anxious.
That's on our list too. All the Stranger Things just came out, so
yeah, we got like 2 or 3 episodes into Stranger Things, and I went, this is strange, and I can do other things.
Aptly named then.
So, yeah.
All right, Seth. Where can people find you online?
Boy, I'm on just about every one of those social media sites, either at Seth Denson or at Seth Denson TV. Is effectively where you're going to find me. I think Twitter is at Seth Denson, Instagram is at Seth Denson TV. I now have a TikTok account.
Oh,
I haven't.
will there be dancing?
I haven't. Oh, there'll absolutely be dancing. It just hasn't been there yet. So if you're not subscribed, you probably want to get there because when that dancing comes out, buddy,
it's going to be special. I'm
but
sure.
yeah, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those that I've learned to love to hate.
Awesome, Seth. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it,
Brother. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.